What's the creepiest town in the USA in your opinion? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. Shreveport is like the Last of Us at nighttime. I was trying to find a gas station in a particularly sketchy part of Shreveport and not having any luck. I was on a lonely rural road when I finally ran out of gas. No cell service. Along comes a creaky old land yacht, driven by a gentleman who introduced himself as Sonny. As a lone woman away from home, Baton Rouge, in a vast country landscape, I weighed my options and I took a ride with Sonny. He drove me about 20 minutes to a podunk gas station, let me borrow a can, then drove me back to my car. Thanks, Sonny. You were the best part of that trip. Story 2. Barstow, California. It's the convergence of highways in the middle of nowhere. It's like an entire town of unhinged hitchhikers who got dumped there. Freak. I had a breakdown in Barstow many years ago. When I found out the part we needed would have to be ordered, I was like, well, I guess I'll find a hotel. The roadside wrecker crew was like, hell no, we're not leaving you here. They limped my car to Tehachapi. Much nicer place. I was once driving on highway late at night outside Barstow and stopped on the side of the road to pee and let my dog pee. While we were out of the car, a disheveled-looking man with long hair and a beard suddenly appeared out of nowhere, walking toward us quite quickly. He didn't say anything, just had this super creepy stare. I grabbed the pup and threw the two of us back in the car, managing to start the car and pull away just as he reached the rear door. It was terrifying and too creepy experience of my life. Story 3. Tonopah, Nevada. Clown motel next to a cemetery full of infants and workers who died in a silver mine. The owner of the clown motel upgraded me for free when I stayed to the room where he keeps the paintings of clowns that he paints himself. To get there, you need to drive through a few hours of pure desert and past area nuclear testing site. Fun times. Edit for those who are interested. We ended up barely sleeping because every hour on the hour there was insane stomping and walking back and forth from the room above us for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. My friend thought it was the owner trying to scare us, but eventually we figured it was probably ghost hunters of some kind. Story 4. I stopped in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho on a road trip 2 years ago. Downtown, doing a little sightseeing on foot, and I approached a four-way intersection. 3 matching black SUVs pulled up to the stop sign, blackout tinted windows and full-length Punisher logos on their hoods. The lead car stopped, and someone on the passenger side rolled their window down just far enough that I could see a ball cap and a pair of sunglasses. Stared me down for a few seconds and drove on. The whole experience felt so far off, I went back to my car and left. Later, I did an internet search on the town and found info on the Aryan Nations compound, the bombings, arson, attacks on Jewish businesses, and the America First white supremacists that still operate there. Story 5. The history of the place is that it used to be a military complex, and much of the town was built up because of its strategic location during World War II. The one building was built to house military personnel and their dependents, but by the time it was finished, basically all military operations in the area had finished, so it was only ever used residentially. A lot of people only live there seasonally, from what I gather, and nowadays it's a bit more of a tourist town. I remember talking to a coffee shop owner who said they only stayed in town for the cruise ship season, about 6-7 months out of the year, and then they go to Florida. It is very beautiful though. There's a relatively unknown waterfall behind the main apartment complex, and there's a gorgeous hike through the rainforest that goes up the mountain behind the building and gives you a great overlook of the town and the port. It is kind of creepy. The second largest building in the town is abandoned, and some of the people can be a bit overly friendly. Story 6. Elgin, Kansas. The motto of the town is, "A town too tough to die." A person told me a story about a time they stopped there on a cross-country motorcycle trip. When they parked, they could see people peeking around the corners of buildings. Shortly after, a woman in an old, dirty wedding dress came around a building pushing an old Victorian baby stroller. There wasn't a baby in the stroller. It was a toy baby. There are trees growing out of buildings. The main street is an out-of-place, super wide brick road for herding cattle through the town back in the way back times, for such a small town of nothing, in the middle of nothing. It was for a short time one of the world's busiest cattle shipping towns. It's a creepy place. Edit it. Town motto. Still just as cool. Story 7. Most towns in East Texas, close to the Louisiana border. They don't want you there, and they'll let you know. I'm a white Texas native, and I don't even feel welcome. The difference in vibes from the Texas border to the Louisiana border is night and day. During a long cross-country road trip, we stopped on the Texas side of the Texas-Sela border, and we were so creeped out by the hostility from literally every person we encountered that we got back in the car and kept driving, choosing to rest stop in Louisiana instead. Crossed over into Louisiana, and it was a completely different thing, almost like we were in another country. Gone was the intense, unfiltered hostility, and in its place was smiling gas station attendants saying, "Hey baby, what you need today? And when getting food nearby, y'all ready to order? Okay, sugar, I'll get that right out." People on the Louisiana side were way friendlier, happier, and welcoming in the most wholesome, charming way. When friends road trip to visit me, I always tell them to gas up in Texas and do not stop until they're in Louisiana. Story 8 picture. Okay, it's an EPA Superfund site that was being cleaned up and bought out. The town was dying literally and figuratively. Then a tornado came through and took care of enough that whoever had remained left. Now it's a ghost town. We drive through there when we go up to Kansas from time to time. It's really freaky. There's huge piles of dirt and stuff from the mining from World War I. Just mounds of toxic material that anyone could easily get out and walk to. And there must have been a fire or something at some point, because there are a lot of burned grass patches and burned homes. And there's a memorial to the high school. It's a different kind of eerie. It was a huge producer of metals for bullets during World War I, and yet, 100 years later, it's barely a blip on even a county map. Story 9. Some friends and I were road tripping from Topeka to Raleigh. After East St. Louis, we thought we were in the clear for a while, so late at night we pulled off in southern Illinois for gas and pee breaks. This little town was like something out of Lovecraft. The woman behind the counter of the gas station never came out from behind the counter to let us confirm she had legs. The bathroom was through the private living quarters where the clerk and her children seemed to live. I won't describe those living quarters other than squalor and converted mechanic's garage. The children definitely had the prairie version of the Innsmouth look about them. We peed, filled up, and skedaddled. A quick loop around the rest of the town didn't reveal a single human being. Just 3 churches brightly lit up on a random weeknight, not Wednesday night during Lent, with full parking lots. Not even someone having a nick fit out the side door. It was so close to being normal, Norman Rockwell Americana, but ever so slightly off in ways that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Story 10. Gettysburg has a thickness I can't explain. Gettysburg, what an unbelievable battle that was. It was so much, and so interesting, and so vicious and horrible, and so beautiful in so many different ways. It represented such a big portion of the success of this country. Gettysburg, wow. I go to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, to look and to watch. And the statement of Robert E. Lee, who's no longer in favor. Did you ever notice it? He's no longer in favor. Never fight uphill, me boys, never fight uphill. They were fighting uphill, he said. Wow, that was a big mistake. He lost his great general. Never fight uphill, me boys. But it was too late. Story 11. I've traveled through a lot of tiny little back towns all around the western U.S. In southeastern California, the towns up the west shore of the Salton Sea have a unique kind of eeriness I've never felt anywhere else. Towns like Salton City, Desert Shores, and Oasis. The Salton Sea, for those unfamiliar, is an inland body of salt water. Back around the 1960s, a bunch of little resort towns popped up along its shores. But sometime in the 70s or 80s, a combination of agricultural runoff and wild variations in the salinity of the sea caused fish to die off in massive numbers. The stench of rotting fish pretty well killed the tourism industry, and the towns along the sea have never recovered. They're not quite ghost towns. There are still a few thousand people living in each of the cities I named, but they're only a fraction of the population they once had. I could definitely feel sort of a depressing weight on the towns. And the dead fish smell is still to this day a constant presence all along the seashore. Story 12. Garberville, California, we took a trip around summer 1998 to see the redwoods in Humboldt County and made the mistake of stopping in Garberville for food and gas. At the subway, the people working seemed incapable of getting our order correct, and when I went to the men's bathroom, I found a young woman dressed like she'd come from a 1970 rock festival passed out in her own vomit with a syringe in her arm. I ran to get the subway manager to call an ambulance. He said to me, "This happens all the time," and then did nothing. I had to convince him to call an ambulance. One of the subway employees said she also worked as a home health aide, and she slowly got up from a chair and went to help the woman. My wife and I went outside and waited for the ambulance, but 2 cops showed up first. They talked to me for a couple minutes, and at one point when I said I wasn't used to finding women OD'd in a restaurant bathroom, he said, "You've never been to Garberville, have you?" The ambulance pulled in, and my wife and I left. No one had made our food, and I just wanted to get out of there. We stopped at a small grocery store next to a gas station, and we bought some snacks after getting gas, and when I commented to the checkout guy that I liked the look of the mountains around the town, he said to me without looking up, "You don't go up into the mountains. You do, and they'll kill you. Don't go up into the mountains." Everyone in the store was looking at me weirdly, and it was like they were all out of central casting for 70s commune cult members. We got the hell out of Garberville. Story 13. For me, it's gotta be Utica, New York, otherwise known as the city God forgot. Parts of the surrounding villages are nice, but there's just something about how the city is seemingly stuck in time in some places, derelict in others, abandoned yet still inhabited. And I definitely do not mean stuck in time in the good, charming way. Plus, there was a sex cult or something at the Oneida Silverware factory. It's pretty beautiful in some views, but it's like the woods of Appalachia. You shouldn't stare at the scenery too long, or you'll end up with a deep unease. Thank God I've only ever been in summers, and not in the much darker, and probably creepier, winter. Story 14. Jerome, Arizona. Its roadways, building foundations, and concrete walls are literally made of dead bodies. It was a mining town in the late 1800s, early 1900s. The head honchos gave zero shits about their employees. Shocker. So when they'd inevitably die from poor working conditions, they had no money for a proper burial and were burned up in the company's smelter. Their remnants, also known as slag, were piled up on the hillside. Built predominantly of wood, the town burned multiple times until a new ordinance forced future buildings to be made of concrete. Concrete needs an aggregate, and it just so happens that slag is just right, aka dead bodies. Jerome is supposedly quite haunted, and it's not hard to imagine why. I'd like to note that today it is an incredibly charming little town, and I think the spooky history adds to that charm. I recommend staying at the Connor Hotel and getting your tintype taken by John, who'll be standing on a random side street. It's a small town, he's hard to miss. Story 15. Jonesport, Maine was really creepy when I visited it. My ex and I were traveling in Maine and looking for a place off US route to stop and get something to eat. He suggested just trying a town off the highway and seeing if we could find a local place. So we exited at Jonesport. It's a fishing town, like tons of towns in Maine, but the strange thing was the atmosphere. I said to my ex that it felt like the kind of town Stephen King would use as a setting in one of his novels. There weren't any restaurants, and everything was pretty run down and decrepit, so we didn't stay long. While we were there, we were followed by 2 different cars the entire time. Guessing they saw we had out-state license plates and were keeping an eye on us, but it made us uncomfortable. Never had this kind of vibe anywhere else I've been. Alright folks, that's a wrap. If you like more of this, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can also share your thoughts in the comment below. I'll see you in the next video.